Hello, it's James here. Hope you're doing really well. So today I want to talk about the importance of balance within mixing. More importantly, I want to talk about how the decisions that you make informed by balance can absolutely make or break your mix. Okay, stick around. So, what is balance? Balance is everything. Balance is mixing. The whole point of mixing is to get everything balanced correctly. I'll use that term usually correctly to achieve a great mix. But the art of great balance is all about understanding the compromises that need to be made in order to achieve that said great mix. Mixing really is all about compromises. For example, if you want everything to be loud, you want everything in a mix to be loud, then in effect, nothing turns out to be loud. For something to actually be loud in a mix, like if you want massive drums, you have to have the reference of something smaller so you can see the difference. So you've got something that's quiet and something that's loud, which again, that comes down to compromise. You're making compromises to determine which one is going to be taking the forefront of the mix. And these creative decisions are what make or break a really fantastic mix. In the same respect, if you get this wrong, if you get something which is too loud in a mix and is drawing too much attention to that element and therefore taking the limelight away from other things in the mix, that can absolutely destroy your mix, and it can come down to just one element. Just one element can absolutely destroy your mix. Now I'm going to get onto some practical examples in a moment, but before I do, I just want to talk about a couple of commercial tracks that you will all know and maybe love that make the most of balance within a mix. The choices made in these songs are what make them really special and what made them kind of quite monumental at the time. So one of them, and I can't play it back in this video because copyright and all that stuff that YouTube doesn't allow, which is fair. One of them is Wonderwall by Oasis. Now, I think we all know that song, but have a listen below. There's a little link. You can go and follow that, but I think we know it. The opening to that song starts with a very lovely sounding acoustic guitar. Sounds great, and it maybe encourages you to turn it up. It's nice and clean, it's nice and clear, it's right there. But then as soon as the lead vocal comes in, it's booming, it's right in your face, it's drastically louder than the acoustic guitar. It's not balanced in a kind of subtle way. It's drastically in your face. It commands you to listen to those vocals. It commands you to listen to the lyrics, and it commands you to focus on that element. As everything else comes into the song, it starts to adjust the balance a little bit more, and everything sounds a little bit more like it's maybe where it should be. But even so, the vocals are still quite loud throughout, and that is a creative decision. They knew that the vocals were the most important part of this song. They knew that they wanted people to sing along to that song, and they knew that people would sing along to that song. So they put the focus on that vocal, and it's wonderfully done. Another one in a very similar respect is Exit Music by Radiohead. That starts with a very, very soft acoustic guitar. And in fact, as it goes on, as it gets closer to the vocal coming in, the acoustic guitar goes down in level. When that vocal comes in, it's very loud. Like in Wonderwall, it's very loud. It's a very different vocal. It's actually quite a soft vocal, but at a very high volume. And the main thing here, it's not that it's at high volume, it's the difference between the acoustic guitar and the vocal. Again, if both of them were at a high volume, neither of them would be considered loud because there's no point of reference to allow that to happen, essentially. Now, those are creative decisions that are informed by balance to create energy, to create something to stand out in a mix, to draw your focus to particular elements. Now, I'm going to show you some practical examples now of a mix that I've done, just so you can kind of hear how you can absolutely make or break a mix just by adjusting the level. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so here is one of my songs and one of my mixes. It's a typical kind of rock song, so you kind of know what to expect. I'm just going to show you a little bit of it so you just get an idea of what it sounds like. Okay, you get the idea. Now, just by making a few changes, a few fairly minor changes, but I'm going to make them a little bit more drastic so you can get the idea, you can really change the feel of the song. Now, this first one you might not notice right away, depends on what you're listening to. So ideally on headphones or on speakers, because we're going to look at the bass. Now, I'm going to pull the bass away and just listen to where the power disappears to. It's like the low end just seems to, as soon as the low end drops out, as does the power. See how much of a difference that made just by getting the bass to the right point. Obviously, when the bass was completely gone, it sounded really thin. It was completely lacking. I mean, a little mention could be to Metallica's And Justice for All, which famously basically had no bass. It was so low in the mix, you could barely hear it. And although it sounded great, could it have sounded more powerful with that bass just nudged up a little bit more? I don't know, but that's another story. So in a similar respect, if we smash the guitars up, I'm just going to do that now, you'll notice how the drums just start to get weaker. I actually quite like my drums to be quite prominent. And although, yes, guitars need to be loud as well, I wanted a little bit more drums in this mix. So I'm just going to crank those guitars and just see how the drums just start to just sound thin and a bit more distant. It might be really fun to have some really loud guitars, but if you're not getting the power from the drums as well, then it's just not what a rock band should be. Now, if we look at the drums just by themselves, they're pretty well balanced as it stands. We'll just have a quick listen to that. Fine. But as soon as you start to put some of the elements out of balance, it really does start to make a difference. So I'm gonna crank the kick and it starts to sound more unnatural. It doesn't sound like drums in a room. Let's now lower the snare a bit. And also, if we pull out the overheads a little bit. Doesn't really sound as much like drums in a room, because there's so much kick drum there. But when you hear that also in a context of everything else, listen to how it just puts everything out of place, and it's like all you're hearing now will be kick drum. I'll show you. You see, now it's just drawn so much attention to that kick drum. I'm not focusing on the mix as a whole. It's all about that kick drum. And I'm also not hearing the supporting rhythm that the ride is doing as well. So you're not really getting that. And then that's going to make a difference to the whole sound of the song. So I'm going to show you that again, make it a little bit more drastic, and then bring things more into balance. So the drums start to sound more like they're an actual drum kit, all part of the same kit instead of separate pieces. And then it will slowly start to draw the whole song together as well. Okay. So just with those small changes, it's brought the song back from sounding out of balance, drawing your focus away to something that it shouldn't be focused on, to a balanced song. And now you're actually just listening to the song. You're not getting taken away by things in the mix. Another element that can really make or break your mix in terms of balance is the vocal. Now, Chris Lord-Alge will say the vocal is king. And in fact, in most mixes and most engineers will say the vocal is king. I do agree with that, but the level at which you mix a vocal can be different depending on genre, which we'll get onto in a moment. But let's just have a quick listen to this next part with the vocal, and you'll hear the difference between it just being too loud and too quiet, and how it can really throw things off. So we'll start with it being too quiet and just feel how dwarfed the vocal gets and how much you're actually having to try and struggle to listen to it. In the same respect, if it's too loud, it's all about the vocal, and now you're not really getting the power of the guitars, and it's just not right for the song. Oh, it's easier to fall down. But you nudge them into the right place, and then it all starts to make sense because the guitars are still big, but the vocal is still present. All right, I think you get the idea. Thanks so much for watching this video so far. If you are enjoying it, please do me a favor, hit the old like and subscribe and the notification bell, and you'll get notified of upcoming videos. It really does help out the channel, so thank you very much everyone who is liking and subscribing so far. Also, if you sign up to the mailing list, I'll send you a bunch of free stuff. You'll get an EQ cheat sheet as well as some one-shots that you can use in your mixes. Okay, let's carry on. So how do you balance things correctly in your mix? If we look firstly at a vocal, which as mentioned, vocal is king. You always need to ensure that you're hearing the vocal. But as I said, it can vary from genre to genre. So for example, in pop, in rap, in R&B, the vocal is always up front. It's always right in your face. It's always on top of the mix. And that's generally where it needs to be. That is where people want to hear it. When you're mixing something like rock music, rock or metal, the vocal will be that much lower. It's not to say you're not going to be able to hear the vocal. You always need to be able to hear the vocal. Again, vocal is still king. But in heavier music, the vocal tends to be tucked in a little bit more. It tends to be surrounded by walls of guitars and big, massive drums. That's something that gives rock music the power. And again, the balance of having the vocal ever so slightly lower, if you like, almost makes it sound like you're in this big wall of sound, like you're in a big cavern of like monstrous aggression. I may be taking a little bit far there, but you get the idea. So if we go back to one of Chris Lord-Alge's methods, he's obviously an absolutely incredible mixer and a living legend. His method for setting a level for vocals is a really great one, and it's one that I use myself as well. So once you have the mix rocking and rolling, it's all sounding good, and you know, you got your drums right. Chris Lord-Alge likes to have big drums, as we know. The snare will be right there. You get the snare right, and then what he will do is he will set the vocal to just above the snare. So it's still king again, because you can always hear it, but it's just above the snare. It's not floating 6 dB above the snare, it's just above it. And that seems like quite a good rule of thumb, especially for rock music. Again, if you're looking at pop music, rap, R&B, you can go that little bit louder. But again, this is all about creative decisions and which genre you're mixing for. So again, on those creative decisions, when you're making these decisions in balance, there aren't really any rules. I mean, there are to a degree. If it sounds bad, then you've done it wrong. But if you're doing something creative, like in the Oasis song, like in the Radiohead song, where you have two elements and one is drastically louder than the other, but you're making a point of that and you're drawing the focus to something, then that's fine. That is a decision that you've made. Also comes down to other things, of course. If the song isn't very good and the production isn't very good, then there's only so much you can do with that. But still, if you're trying to make that radical decision, then that's absolutely fine, so long as you execute it well. But what about general balance? What about just generally balancing things? You're not going for something radical like I just mentioned. You just want things to sound good. You want things to sound like they're not out of place. You want something to sound well balanced and not distracting. Now, one of the best ways to achieve great balance is to mix at low levels. Now, there's a whole story, there's a whole other video about mixing at low levels, which I won't go into now, but mixing at low levels can be really, really beneficial. For one, if you're in an untreated room, like my room is pretty well treated, but if you're in an untreated room and you crank the volume up, the louder you play that, the mix is going to start to get skewed, essentially. It's going to be starting to take on the issues that your room has. So your room is going to be impacting on how you are hearing this mix. If you don't have very good bass trapping in your room and your room doesn't cope very well with the bass, you're not going to be able to make very good decisions. And when you crank that up, it's going to be increasing the issue. It's going to be making it even worse because you're pushing these waves around the room and then they're just doubling or cancelling out or whatever they're doing. So therefore, you're not going to be able to make proper decisions. So mixing at a low level helps to mitigate any issues you might have with your room. But that's not the only reason. So again, Chris Lord-Alge, bit of a legend. When he's balancing, he mixes at very, very low levels. Famously so. He's mixing so quietly he can hear his assistants like texting on the other side of the room. So he likes it proper quiet. Andrew Sheps, he'll famously mix really quiet or really loud. That's another thing to consider. If you're listening to something disgustingly loud, I don't mean like blowing your eardrums off, like, you know, don't be silly. But if you listen to something very, very loud, things are going to jump out of the mix at you. You're going to instantly hear, oh my God, that kick drum is wrong. I need to sort that out. I'm not suggesting to do that. I'm just offering another technique. As I said, I prefer setting a balance at a low level. So the good thing about doing it at a low level is things do pop out. It's like you have a bird's eye view of the mix. You've got nothing else which is influencing this decision at this point. You're managing to zoom all the way out. It's like looking if you're on your DAW and you zoom all the way out and you can see your entire song and you can very quickly see that's the chorus. There's loads of stuff in that chorus, there's loads of things happening. This is the same way. But as you're listening at the low level, things will jump out. Things that are wrong are going to jump out, and you're instantly going to be able to tell that there's an issue that needs to be rectified there. When I'm mixing, once I've got everything underway and I'm feeling very happy, I do a lot of my mixing at a low level, especially towards the end. All these minor changes all need to be done, in my opinion, at a low level. And the more you do that, the more things are going to translate better on other systems as well, because the overall balance of the song is good. So I hope that helps. I hope there's been a few things for you to think about there, and hopefully a couple of techniques which might help to get the balance right and to get your mixes sounding awesome. If you've got any thoughts, of course, please hit me up in the comments. It's always good to get a bit of a conversation going about this. And if you have any other techniques yourself, it's always good to hear them. If you have any questions, hit me up and I'll try my best to answer. All right, well, that is it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.